I'm sure you've heard a million times how important visibility is in your business. And sure, it matters, but as a mom, finding the time to crank out content all day just to get seen feels impossible. That's why I sat down with podcast guesting strategist and fellow mompreneur Candace Dudley to talk about a different way to do it: podcast guesting. Candace is a podcast guesting coach and host of the Better Brave podcast. With 180 plus episodes produced and 30 plus guest appearances in the last year, she helps busy solopreneurs grow their visibility and impact through intentional podcast guesting. Candace is passionate about making guesting the go-to networking and marketing tool for entrepreneurs who want big results without burnout. So if you want to grow your audience and find people that are really aligned with you and your business, this is a really great way to do it. And I'm really excited for you to learn all about strategic, intentional podcast guesting from Candace. Welcome to Mompreneur Mastery. I'm your host, Sydney O'Brien, an Instagram strategist turned content and messaging strategist after watching the online space get louder, buyers take longer, and content turn into a performance instead of real connection. On this podcast, you'll learn how to clarify your message so your content actually stands out in a sea of copy and paste trends and AI noise, and also how to strategize your content across platforms to build the trust and connection that turns followers into clients, all in doable, brain space saving episodes you can fit in between school pickup and reheating your coffee for the third time. Let's dive in. What do you think your number one tip would be for any mompreneur who wants to get into podcast guesting?
Sure. Yeah. If you are someone that is feeling like you just wish more people would see your offer, you're feeling super confident in the value that you could give, podcast guessing is probably a spot where you can start putting some attention. It is a huge bang for your buck. It is going to work for you behind the scenes. But where I would say you start is the first step in my process is always to pull out your niche topics. And I mean your speaking topics. Having 2 to 3 of them sort of in your back pocket are going to be what everything else in my process that I do with my clients and what I suggest to everyone is going to be the biggest part, the most important part that you do before you start looking for podcasts to be on or anything like that. Because without knowing what your topics are, it makes pitching really hard. It makes finding shows hard because there's no sort of navigation without having that piece. So one thing you can do if you're like, I don't know where to start, one thing you can ask yourself is if you had a guest on a podcast tomorrow, and you had no time to prepare, what comes to mind that you could talk about? And that's probably going to be a spot where there's a topic in there. Other things you can look at are we often have free resources or things, we exchange for an email address, a downloadable, something like that. Paid offers, dream client signings that we can think about. There's speaking topics in there, especially when those things are all really cohesive and they, go together. What kind of topics are in there? Because when you get on the show, that is how the host is going to ask you questions that are right in your wheelhouse, right in your expertise that you can feel super confident answering instead of worrying about being asked things that maybe you don't know a lot about or don't feel comfortable answering. So getting your speaking topics really narrowed in and honed in on, that's going to be huge to start with.
I love that. And I feel like as someone who gets pitches for a podcast, the more niche it is, the more likely I am to say yes. Because, well, I mean, like the rest of the pitch has to be good too. It has to be a good fit. But if someone just tells me they want to come and talk about like email marketing, I'm always like, well, what about email marketing? I've had email marketers on before. Like, what's the new angle here? Why is this particular thing going to be valuable? So yes, getting very niche is a helpful all around.
Exactly. It makes it an easy yes and also an easy no. So I also tell people don't be hung up necessarily on the no's. It really means that your messaging and who you are for, who your message is for, is very dialed in. And that's a great thing. That means that when the yes does come, it is going to be very aligned. The audience is going to be a warm audience. They likely have already been searching for things that you are doing and offering, but we just need to get you in front of them, right? As hosts, we're always looking for great quality guests who can bring value specifically to our show, which is why my whole process is always value led, that service, heart centered type of feeling. Because as a host, that's what we care about. We want you to bring value to our audience because that's what we have strived to do since the beginning of setting up our podcast. So when you can do that, you're going to get a lot of more yeses quicker. And those are going to be super aligned audiences that are likely ready to jump on what you have going on.
Mhm. If someone has never been a podcast guest before, what should they do to prepare?
Mm. Yeah, actually, I help with this and strategize with them. And honestly, one of the hangups is I think I have to have my own podcast to be able to guest on a podcast. And that's not true. In fact, to date, all of my clients so far have not had their own podcast. So it's very doable, even if you don't have your own podcast. But what they can do to prepare is to, one, just be intentional. So I always say there's three parts to being on a podcast once you've booked it and being on it. One is your introduction, and then that middle chunk, the value. So the things that you're going to offer, maybe some actionable things. That's where your expertise is going to shine. That's where you're going to be highlighted as the go-to in your industry. And the third part I call the outro, and that's where you're going to send someone. So one thing we can think about for the intro, because this is a thing that has caught me in the past when I first started dabbling years ago in guesting, I was just so excited. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a strategy. I was just thrilled to be doing it and getting to share. And so I got on the show. And of course, they asked me, hey, tell us who you are and how you got here. Some type of intro question that is very common in our podcasting world to be asked. And so I went into like life story, every twist and turn and pivot. And while there's value in your story, there's value in those pivots. If it's a quick hitting episode, maybe 20, 30 minutes, it's very easy to start talking about yourself for 5 minutes or so. And now you've taken up a big fraction of that show. And we haven't even gotten to your expertise yet. And so we want to make that really sweet and short and concise. And that's one thing you can practice because it's very likely that you'll be asked something like that. So that is definitely one place that you can improve your talk, I guess, in a big way, is to think about that and how you'd answer that.
Yeah, that's super smart. And I feel like what you were saying before about having the niche topics down, that would also help a ton in preparation. Like the more niche it is, the more comfortable you are because it's just a thing you know so well.
Absolutely, and that's a good point to emphasize even more is when you've done that work and you have those topics, now that middle value part is going to be more impactful. And we might have a lot of things going on in our business that we would love to talk about, but one podcast episode, the listener's attention span, just how we are, you can't talk about five different things. By the time you get done with that episode, people listening and even the host are going to have a more generalist feel about you. So the more specific you can be, honing in on one thing, it doesn't mean you couldn't go on another podcast and talk about a slightly different topic or another piece of your business. It just means for that one episode, getting specific and covering just one thing is going to be more impactful and likely convert people into coming over and following you, possibly downloading your free resources or working with you because you were so specific. So now when something gets brought up, or that host in particular tends to be a person that people will come to and ask, hey, do you know someone that helps with this? Because they know that we have connections and we network and we talk to people, we have different experts on our shows. So we're common people that get asked that. And so keeping that relationship with that host going, especially the ones that you really vibe with, is another huge part to think about and just continue to cheer each other on, because that's where referrals potentially could come down the road. But again, when you deliver a talk that is very specific, very niche, you'll be top of mind when they get asked, hey, do you know someone who does this? You don't do it, but do you know someone who does? They're going to think of you, versus if you got on and talked about 4 or 5 different things, you're probably not going to be what they think of.
That's such a good point because I do get asked that a lot. And I'm like, I have this like mental Rolodex of people who have like such very niche topics that I can recommend now. It's so fun. I feel like
Yes.
I see that a lot on threads too, people asking for advice. And I'll just be like, oh, I worked with this person. I'll tag them.
Yes,
Hopefully they get
exactly.
some kind of like job or visibility from it.
Absolutely. That happens more than you think. And honestly, when I started taking this really serious in my own business at the start of 2025, that's a ripple effect I really wasn't expecting or prepared for, is how many times a host or someone that you spoke on their show will tag you, especially on threads, because that is where we're going and saying, and I just did it last week. I said, I am looking to expand my offer suite. I just want someone in this area. Like, who do we know? Send them my way. And then you get all these tags. And yes, that certainly has happened. Or if someone is looking for guesting advice, I tend to get tagged from past interviews that I've done or hosts. And that's really exciting. And it's just building that like online community that entrepreneurship, as you know, especially being a mom and we're doing so many things, wearing so many hats, it can feel lonely. And it's so great when you start to feel like going online and onto social media and places that you have people in your corner cheering for you, tagging you, and that type of thing, and referring you. Referrals make things so much easier for people to click buy or to, invest in you because they already trust the person that's tagging you. And that's the best kind of marketing out there.
Yeah, I was just talking with someone about that the other day, how they do less marketing now, but are still like doing a lot of networking. So they get a lot of referrals that way. And I was like, it makes so much sense. I would much rather go off of like someone else's word and their experience than this random person online, even after going through their 7 email funnel or whatever.
Absolutely, and I think we're also so burnt out or maybe mistrusting because of all the AI and all the different things, so it's hard to tell, like, is this person real? I don't know them. Does anyone I know actually know if they're real or not? And so we have this hesitation, or we've been burned in the past where we've invested money and then it hasn't been what we thought, and so there's a lot of things to overcome when you're trying to sell your services and things like that, but that's why that network piece that comes when you do guest and you do it in this strategic way can be very impactful and things that you just can't even see down the road of doors that could potentially open or collaborations that you don't even see. Some people that host podcasts also have memberships and like I think for us, and they want speakers each month. And so we're doing that too. So that's something awesome that you don't know when you go in and you book that one show of what can unfold in the future.
For sure. Yeah, and the thing that you just said about people buying things and then, like, not really getting what they thought they were getting, I feel like once again, this comes back to knowing your niche topic. Because when you're able to communicate that effectively, people are much more confident in buying from you because they know exactly what they're getting.
Absolutely. And that's another thing that comes from guesting so much is that you're forced to talk about your offer and your expertise over and over and over. And you'll find that doing that many reps and that much practice, it kind of ripples into everything else. Like I found it's easier to write emails to my email list, write posts on social media because I have practiced this. It's like a muscle in putting in this repetition of having to discuss that, and you just get clearer and clearer on what that message is the more you do it.
Mhm. It also I feel like I got better at being a guest and being, like, comfortable talking about it even if I got asked questions that were, like, a little off topic because I just knew what I was doing and talking about.
Absolutely, and trusting that you know enough. Don't
Yeah.
need to go out and get another certification or, have more clients until
Right.
all these things that we think we have to do before we can guest on a podcast, before we can speak to something. But the truth, I fully believe this, there's enough people for all of us. And someone is waiting to hear your take on it, your way of doing things, your story, because they haven't connected with me yet or someone else yet. And they're waiting for us. And so that's one thing I love about podcasting is it's giving a voice to maybe people or communities or groups of people that don't necessarily get their voice heard very often. And then the ripple effect of that is you get someone listening can feel seen and heard and validated. And that's, 4+ years ago now when I started my own podcast, that's why I started it because I was listening to podcasts after having babies and felt like, oh, she gets me. And that was huge. And that created a ripple effect. And I wanted to give that to other people.
I love that so much. I was very similar, but with Instagram. After I had my kids, I leaned hard into social media. We are a military family and move a lot, and I didn't have any family. So I'd be scrolling and posting pictures of my kids for my family and seeing their pictures. It was really nice. But that connection piece is just so, so important.
Yeah, it is. And we feel like we're kind of crazy if we only have our own thoughts in our own head. And so getting to talk and connect and collaborate is huge.
It's so huge. And I think I was talking with someone else about this the other day, but I think seeing a shift in like online marketing, more specifically like social media and email marketing, where a lot of the written content is AI generated, which isn't inherently bad, but I think a lot of the stuff that we see isn't fine tuned afterward. And so I think people are more and more craving that personal connection. So when you have like that solid messaging or when you do a podcast and that people can hear your voice and connect with you in new ways, I think that's going to be even more powerful than ever. especially for service providers.
I agree. We're at a point where the pendulum's swinging back the other way and we want humanness, we want genuineness. And so podcasting, especially so many shows that are adding that video component to it, but even if it is audio, it's just this deeper layer. You can hear their vibe, you can
Mhm.
hear their personality. You can use AI and you can fake it for a story or on social media, but when you're talking for 20, 40 minutes on a podcast, it's you. Like,
Yeah.
they're getting you, and so I think that's really fun too and something that's not gonna go away.
Yeah, definitely. I had a thought and then I lost it. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Thank goodness for editing. That's like another reason I love podcasts, honest.
So much control over the
Yes.
environment and the edits and everything.
Yeah. Even when I do like record a reel or something, there's like an 80% chance one of my kids is going to walk in and I'm going to have to start like the whole thing over. But with a podcast, it's like so much easier to just like delete that one chunk and move on with my life.
Exactly.
Speaking of kids interrupting, do you have tips for moms who want to be guests that have kids at home?
Oh, yes, that I work the most with, and I have 3 kids of my own that are super young and just sent them back to school finally this week, which has been great. It's a lot easier to record when they're not here, but if you don't have that option, what you can take and kind of ease your mind is with podcast guesting, how the process will work is once the hostess says, "Yeah, I wanna have you on the show," they're gonna send you a calendar, check their calendar, and you get to pick a spot that works best for you. So maybe you have an hour or 2 where you don't have kids each week. Maybe that's when you book all of your guesting spots, right? So there's just so much control over that. But also, if you are using the strategies that I talk about and finding shows that match with you in some way with your value, your mission, your message, then it's likely that you're like, if you're on my show or Sydney's here, if your kid interrupts, totally okay. We got you. We will edit that out or we'll leave it in because it's also just we're human. And that's a great part too to be like, look, we are building businesses, we're creating lives around our families while we're moms. And that's our top most important job. So there's shows out there for you. And when you are finding those aligned shows, they're not gonna care. They're gonna take you as you are, and they're gonna love that part, but there's also always editing and, just control over your environment and control over when you schedule and book that show.
Mhm. That's so true. I cannot even tell you the number of times that guest kids or like my kids have come on during a recording, and it's just like, I'm so used to it. No one cares.
Yeah.
It's fine. That's why
No.
I love working with moms.
I had one get on actually, the episode's coming out this fall on my show, Emily. I love her. She about her baby was supposed to be napping. She picked the time. She's like, "This is gonna work perfectly." Of course, it didn't work perfectly. She didn't nap until we were done. So she's holding her up on her shoulder during the whole episode, and she's just going, giving great
Yep.
advice, and you can hear the baby cooing here and there, and I left it all because I was like, "This is what we're doing. It's authentic, and I love this."
Yeah. That's real life as a business owner with kids. So, yeah,
Yep.
love it. I had one like just 3 days ago. I was interviewing someone and I was asking a question, and my 5-year-old came in and needed help zipping up his Spider-Man costume. So you can see me
Of
like reach
course.
off camera to zip it up.
Yes, as he should be getting that Spider-Man
Yeah,
costume on
it's
a
very
random
important.
weekday.
You gotta have it.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
what kind of like growth or wins have you seen your clients get from being podcast guests?
Yeah, my one client that always comes to mind for this question is Kelly, and she had under 1,500 Instagram followers. So that's another thing. We think we have to have huge accounts, and it's just not true. But she came to me and she did my podcast guesting accelerator, and she wanted to guest on 6 podcasts for the year. And she booked 7 in that week and 8 by the end of the month. And she had recorded those. And she was booked out after that for 3 months. Like all of her
Oh
summer
my
months were
gosh.
booked. She's an SEO website service provider, designer, and all of her spots were full. And that's just a good example of, yes, podcasting is like this long game, I think we think about it as, but that's because it's long form content. It's out there, it's evergreen, it's searchable, and it lasts so long. People can find you organically much longer than they could from a social media post, but it's also so fast when you do it right, when you have a plan and a strategy. Because when you're on those aligned shows, it can be so fast, just like Kelly saw, because she was in front of audiences that were possibly already looking for her because the host knows what their audience would like and wants to see, and they're bringing you on. And it's also, it's like borrowing their trust. They've already built the know, like, and trust with their listeners. And so when they have a guest on, they don't even have to say it. But what they're telling the listeners is, I trust her. You can trust her too. I've checked her out for you. It's authority is saying you can trust her. And so it can be really fast as well when you have a little bit of a strategy and you're in front of those aligned audiences.
Mhm. I love that. I feel like the first time I did podcast guesting, and like you said, I still don't have like a ton of followers or anything. I didn't have a podcast of my own yet. I just happened to have friends who wanted an Instagram person. I was like, yes, please, I would love to do that. But yeah, I met some really great people afterwards, and I still get those people signing up to my freebie because not only by the podcast episode, but they also wrote blog posts for it. So it's just another way to show up in searches on the internet instead of on
Yes.
Apple Podcasts. So lots of wins.
Absolutely. A lot of people are doing that now where they take your podcast episode and turn it into a blog. And it's not something I did in the beginning because you're learning so much and it takes so long because you're creating a new skill, learning a new skill. But as you get going, if you do end up with the time, like that's another great way to double dip because blogs and podcasts, they're about the only two things that are, long form content that's just out there and people can organically find when they had to Google or show up in ChatGPT, all those things.
Yeah, exactly. I've started getting more intentional with my blogging too, and it's been super helpful. But yeah, every podcast episode is also a blog for extra searchability.
Yeah. Another good tip that you mentioned with your freebie of people still downloading that, that's a good thing to think about as well when you're getting on a show. You want it to be something that's, first of all, an easy yes, it's value packed. And they're like, of course, I want to go download that because it brings those people into your community instead of just being like, oh, she was a great guest and then never
Right.
joining you. But having that content or whatever that is that they're going to download, you don't want it to get on a show and have this seasonal thing where the date is, maybe it's September and now your episode doesn't air for a few months and you might already miss it. So you want that, a year later when someone finds this episode and they listen to it, that they could still go and download that resource would be
Yeah,
ideal.
that's a really good point. And I feel like it really depends. Like, it might be a question worth asking when you do book with someone, like when it's going to air to figure out what you want to share on there, like what link you
Yes.
ask them to put in the show notes, because some people it's like a very quick turnaround time and other people it's like very long. So you never know unless you ask.
Yes, I have been on shows and they're like, I am putting this out on Monday, like that very
Hmm.
next week. And then I've been on shows where it's 2, 3 months because they book, seasonally and they're always a quarter ahead. So yeah, asking that is definitely going to help you
Yeah.
prepare, but also just knowing that that episode is going to be there. It's like indefinitely out there unless they were to stop their podcast and go and delete it all. It's just going to be out there. So thinking about what you want that link to be, that's going to be important.
Hmm. What would you say a client should never put in their pitch? I have some ideas as someone who gets pitched, but I would love to hear yours.
Oh gosh, I don't know if it's, like, what they should never say, but I don't think you should ever be pitching unless you've listened to the podcast.
That's
That's
a
gonna
good
be my
one.
first thing.
Yeah.
It's funny that we have to say that, but
Right.
as hosts, we know that every week, if not daily, we're getting, like, ick pitches. A lot of times it's from companies that are pitching their client, and I don't really have a problem with that, but I don't do that for my clients. I'll go get you all the contact information. I will hand that off to you in a tracker in a nice bow so you don't have to search for anything. But the few seconds that it would take you to DM a host about pitching yourself to be on the show, I think is so much more genuine and human and gonna book you that show much quicker and more often than if I send an email on your behalf. I think we're getting too many icky ones right now that so many hosts are just spamming those, putting them in our junk folders. So I would definitely say if you can go send a DM and not an email. If you can send a voice note, show your humanness even more. That's going to go a lot longer. But as far as like what I put in a pitch, I think it's two main things that we want to know as hosts. One, I want to know, have you done your homework? Did you listen to my show? And tell me briefly something that tells me she gets it and she matches in some way, shape, or form with my voice message mission of my podcast, because that's very important. Because otherwise, you're going to get done with the episode and you're not going to want to share it because you're going to be like, wait, I don't actually agree with her and I don't want to be a part of this. That's not good on either account because now you've burned a bridge.
Right.
And it's kind of a waste of time. But so I need to know first thing, did you do your homework? How do we, like, why are we aligned? And then the biggest part is what value are you going to bring? And that goes back to step one, those niche topics, having those 3 speaking topics where you can easily say, hey, I see you're having guests on your show and they haven't covered this area of email marketing, this specific part of email marketing. And here is my take on it. These are 3 topics that I could bring. I know I could bring a lot of value to your show. Does any of them sound like a fit? Don't overthink this. I don't think there's like, you need to follow me for 2 months before you can pitch me. If you're leading with this value and this genuineness, pitch away. If you've listened to my show, you've done your homework, and you can tell me what kind of value you're going to bring my audience, that is going to make it so easy for a host to say yes or no.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are my favorite pitches to get. Like you said, I have every day, I feel like at least 5 to 10 minimum, like pitches from random
Yes.
companies, random people who like briefly mention the name of my podcast and maybe an episode they say they listen to, but then you keep
The
reading
title
the
of
email.
It's the title.
Yeah, and nothing else makes sense at all. So personal pitches in DMs, voice notes are my favorite to get because I know you're like a real person who's actually interested, not just someone mass emailing a whole bunch of
Copy,
people.
pasting. Yes.
I got one the other day that was like, they had like in brackets where they were going to put the title
Yes,
of
and
a
they didn't
show.
fill it. I've gotten that before too. I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope someone's not paying you tons of money to do this for them because this is awful.
So bad. It makes me want to like email those people and be like, I just want you to know what you're paying for right now.
Yes,
It's
100%.
not great.
I mean, people that don't have a podcast, they're like, no way is this happening. And it's like, no, literally,
No.
I don't care what the size of your podcast is, you're getting these messages.
Mhm.
And you know you're nodding along if you have one, and you're like, it's bad out there.
It's so
It's
bad. I don't even know how, but I got one to my like personal email address the other day, not even my business one. I was like, how did this happen? This is weird.
How'd they even find it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
creepy.
if you can have some value, some speaking topics on it, you're way ahead of the ball game. You
Absolutely.
just trust us.
Yes. I would much rather get like a 2 or 3 sentence DM than some like long, overly complicated email, like every day of the week.
Amen. 100%.
Yeah. So send the DM, please. It's much more personal and we love getting them.
Absolutely.
If someone has never pitched themselves before, what would you say to like motivate them to do it, or even like where to find someone to pitch to?
Well, we always think worst case scenario, except for I think men, because I had a friend of mine, he's an author, he used to be a teacher, and he was on my podcast, and he was like, well, I always just think about like, what's the best thing that can happen? And I'm like, well, that's crazy because my brain always goes to what's the worst thing that can happen? But I like to think of his advice and think, what's the best thing that could happen? Because obviously the worst thing that could happen, well, maybe it's not obvious, but I'll tell you what it is. The worst thing that can happen when you send a pitch is you're going to get ghosted or told no. And in which case, nobody else knows and life goes on and it's no big deal. The best case scenario is that they say yes. And now you get to go meet this new audience and meet this new host. And who knows what could happen from that one door opening. So leaning into that type of energy, one, is great. It's some good mindset, good vibes.
Mhm.
And then what was the other part that you asked? You said, oh, where to find the show.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, because when you go to Apple or Spotify and you search, you really are usually just going to get big, huge production company type podcasts. And that's typically not, I mean, maybe you want to shoot your shot and aim for some of those, but it's typically not what, we're looking for when we're talking about this. And so it's sort of a breadcrumb trail. I do this for my clients, tapping into my 4-year plus network of podcast hosts and things. But if you're going to try to dabble in this, it's really finding a show. Like, obviously, you're listening to Sydney's show if you're hearing us right now, right? And so you might be jiving with her. Maybe you're going to pitch Sydney, but also maybe you're noticing, oh, Candace has a podcast. I can go over to Candace's. When you look at my guest episodes, you'll find there are podcast hosts that I have interviewed. So you could go to their show. It kind of ends up being this breadcrumb trail, which is also why I have a tracker that people can use. I think we've got a link that you can, I think I already sent it to you, but it's a free one they can grab because you're going to start to be like, whoa, I need a place to store this. I need a place to keep track of all this. So I know who I'm talking to, who I need to follow up with. And it sort of becomes this sort of breadcrumb trail that you'll start to find these shows like ours that are more independently run that you're likely wanting to connect with.
Yeah, that's such great advice. And the tracker is also amazing because I am definitely a person where I'm like, oh, I'll send this pitch and then like forget about it and then like forget to follow up because, oh, also I would recommend like don't be afraid to follow up because 9 times out of 10, if I don't respond, well, actually, a lot of the times it's just because it's a horrible pitch from like we were just talking about. But if it's
Yep.
like a real person, I normally just forget to respond.
Right.
Like one, my kids will start fighting and I get distracted and then I lose track of it completely. So don't be afraid to follow up. But having a tracker helps with that immensely.
Yeah, because the other thing is I'm a big batcher, so there might be a day where I'm, like, loving behind the scenes work, and I'm just gonna listen to a bunch of podcasts, see what I jive with, looking for my clients' podcasts, things like that, and I'm just gonna start putting those in my tracker. I'm gonna link the show so that I don't have to go find it again later. While I'm in the show, I'm gonna find their Instagram handle, I'm gonna link that. I'm gonna find their email address, I'm gonna link that in there. I'm gonna do all that in maybe one day, and then a different day where I'm really vibing high, I'm in great energy, that's when I'm gonna go through and send those voice notes or pitches because that energy I think is really important when you're having your voice come through. You don't want to send it on a day like you're not feeling good, you're tired. Like, don't send your pitches on that day, send them on a different day. But the other thing you can do is utilize threads. It's such a great place. Share your niche topics. When you do that step one and you have those, start sharing it. And you'll be surprised that the algorithm bringing you podcast hosts or someone tagging you. You just don't know what can happen. And so it doesn't have to be something super hard. Obviously, hiring people can speed things up, but I know there's a lot of DIYers out there too. So I'm cheering you on too. Like, that's what you can do to go start dabbling.
Yeah. Threads is such an underrated place for that. I feel like everyone is always like, there's just such a great like, community of online business owners there. I love it so much.
It does. The vibe is great right now. It just feels so genuine, so pure. People are
Yeah.
really actually cheering you on. It's
Yeah.
just a great place. Yeah.
Yeah. Great place to be for sure. And for people who haven't done this before, you have a getting started guide to share with them. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's put that in the show notes. And it is like a 15-minute video. You can take it, run with it. It's my whole 5-step process. You can see from start to finish how you can really strategize and make this very effective and get you right in front of the most aligned audiences for you and your business.
I love that. So much comes down to getting in front of the right audiences, but when you do, it's like so many doors open. It's like so helpful for your business, especially as a mom who doesn't want to create content all day for visibility.
Absolutely. Rest assured, there's people out there looking for your services right now, but they can't find you. Podcast guesting is all about putting you in front of them, putting you in the room with the right people. And so when you do follow the plan, when you follow that strategy, you're right. There's a little bit of magic and it just feels great. It feels so aligned, feels so easeful instead of, the grind that
Yes.
sometimes you can feel.
Yes, absolutely. The link for that will be in the show notes. And then can you tell us your Instagram and Threads handle so people can connect with you there as well?
Yes, I would love to hear from you. It is me in the DM, so I always love getting a message from you guys, but it's just my name, Candace Dudley. So you can find me at Candace Dudley, Threads, Instagram, and CandaceDudley.com is my website too if you want more information.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Candace. I love getting to talk to you all about podcast guesting, and I'm really excited to hear from listeners about their takeaways and who they're going to pitch.
Same. Send those DMs. I want to hear them.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Mompreneur Mastery. If you're building a business around your life, not the other way around, and you're tired of being told to hustle harder to make sales when you're already hustling at 110%, I hope this gave you a breath of fresh air. And if it did, I would love it if you left a quick review or shared this with another mom entrepreneur who is ready to market with more strategy and way less stress. And if you want to see what a cohesive content map across multiple platforms with strategic messaging looks like, check out the link in the show notes to grab your free copy of the Buyer Journey Content Map. I'll see you next time.